I take a little tour into my studio. It's just beside the Church of San Marco here. It's very handy. Let's just in the door here. There's a nice article on the door here about the studio and its activities. Ciao. And in here you have the studio proper, where this is where I teach anatomy and sculpture, mostly. Different anatomical structures of the bones broken down into different categories. Skeleton. These are exhibition of a number of drawings here, which are broken down into the anatomy of the human body. First of all, drawing the bones. This is very scientific, drawing the bones and then applying the muscles with transparencies on top. And I've color-coded the muscles into 5 different categories. The extensor, flexor, abductor, adductor, and rotator. And by doing that, it simplifies the study of anatomy into 5 actions. And once you understand the 5 actions and you understand their function, it's much easier to remember the muscle. So if you understand its origin and its insertion, and you know its action, then it's much easier to understand. So they're all broken down into different groups. So that's an analysis of the language of sculpture, or language of anatomy. It's kind of like an anatomical grammar. And I use that to study the great masters' drawings. For instance, this is an enlarged drawing I've done of a Pontormo drawing, who was a student of Del Sarto, who was a student of Michelangelo. And with this drawing, I've used the skeleton down there to analyze and do an X-ray of this drawing by putting this transparency on top of that drawing and then pulling out the skeleton. By doing that, I understand the direction of each form and the length of each form, because the bones don't change. And then once the bones are drawn, then I can put another transparency on top of that, and that will help to understand how the bones are, or how the muscles are applied on the bones, from origin to insertion, each muscle, and each function. And by comparing this to this, we get a much better understanding of what it means to create art, because this is not art, this is scientific breakdown of the body, whereas this is an artistic application of that breakdown. So you'll notice that the mannerist distortions of Pontormo, like this arm for instance here, you see it's quite large here, and it tapers quite thin here, it's very exaggerated. And you can see how that was in the bones, how the bones could exist in something in this. And then you see it with analysed through the muscles. Yeah, so you can see it very clearly, the difference between this arm and this arm here. So by doing this, you start to see the distortions made by the artist. And you see how this language, this grammar, has been turned into poetry here, just as Shakespeare would use the English language to say, use words in different ways to communicate profounder realities of the human condition. Same with artists, they would distort aspects, abstract from life and nature and the classic ideal to come to a deeper understanding. Here we have another transparency which was placed on the original drawing down here. And this transparency is a breakdown of the anatomy of the drapery. So in order to understand the drapery, you must understand the understructures. So the bones, muscles, then drapery. So by looking at this, you start to understand very clearly what goes into creating a great masterpiece. This crucifix here is the first exploration into this whole area of anatomy and how it's used as an artistic language. So this is an academic study of the crucifixion, broken down into each muscle and bone. This here is a planar breakdown of the head. So this is another way of studying form. You can study from the inside out with anatomy, or you can study from the outside in with architectonic structure of the head or any part of the body. Now with these two different modes of studying form, you come to a very, very solid rendering of the human body. And with this language, you should be able to communicate anything. Here we have a plaster version of a sculpture I did in New York of Saint Escriva. And here is a marble version where I used the macchinato di punti to transfer points from the plaster original to the marble copy. Okay, and here we have a sketch, a modello of the composition I'm using for Campus Via Medico Church in Rome. And these are stations of the cross which I'm working on for next door, the church next door, San Marco. So these are just sketches which are not finalized yet. And here we have a composition of another altarpiece for Milan, where I'm working on a number of figures.